let's start off. We have 3 members of Courage to Resist and Veterans for Peace with us. And let's start. I want to introduce Stephanie Atkinson. Stephanie was a Gulf War resistor along with so I got to know her a little bit in December of 1990 when we both were resistors to the first Gulf War. And she has just come aboard. She was a volunteer for Courage to Resist for a while now, and she will be our new admin manager going forward. So we're very excited to have her on staff, part-time staff. So Stephanie, what have you been up to? Who you are, and tell us about yourself.
What have I been up to? Well, I've been overcommitting to lots of meetings. I just became the chapter secretary for VFP 92 in Seattle, and editing the podcast that Courage to Resist produces is how I started, and then signing on to Gamers for Peace to just try to get on committees there and just get in everybody's hair pretty much. Just throw my efforts at see what sticks. So this is one of those things. Say again, Jeff.
I was on mute. So thanks, Steph. You did not go on too long. That was very short and efficient.
I'm trying.
Appreciate that.
Trying.
All right.
Brevity.
James Branum is one of the most famous GI rights attorneys in the Oklahoma area, and the greater part of the county, I'm sure. James.
Hi, everyone. I've worked as a solo attorney since 2006, and almost all of my work has been in the context of military criminal defense, administrative law, that kind of thing. And my experience with Courage to Resist began in the early days from the standpoint of Courage to Resist stepping up to provide support to some of my clients. And over time, it became much more of a partnership rather than just these are people that raise money to make it possible to do these cases. It was much more than that. Involved in over time, it was really a much more partnership kind of relationship. And so from that, the last few years, I've been a part of the Courage to Resist collective itself, and that's been a really good experience. Also, I'd say another big part of my work is I work a lot with the Military Law Task Force, the National Lawyers Guild. And that's really has grown to a much more bigger part of the work because I'm in the middle of a career transition. We'll still do occasional cases, but I'm really getting to the point that I'm second round of burnout. So I'm wanting to not do so many cases and instead focus more on training and writing. And part of my logic for that is very simple. There's a lot more need than I can possibly meet. We need a lot more lawyers doing this work. And so I feel like that my time might be better spent as much as possible on the training side of it. And I think I have some unique skill sets in that area, some unique experiences. And so one of the things I'm hoping from this to kind of throw out there for this meeting is in the training front, the MLTF, we do have a small bit of funding we've received for some trainings this coming year. We're working hard to put it all together. It's taking a little bit longer than we thought for that to happen. And so that's one of the things that I would like to discuss with you all is how we can move that forward, and also how can we recruit more lawyers and legal workers to this work, because I think that the need is going to be a lot higher in the years to come. And lastly, I wanted to mention that I also think that we're now in this far enough in this round of the wars, the Iraq and Afghan and veterans, that there's a fair number now who went through some heavy stuff 5, 10, or longer years ago and are now wanting to get plugged back into activism. Mm-hmm. And I would love to explore sustainable ways for that to happen. In the early days of those wars, it wasn't always sustainable for many of those veterans, but enough time has passed. I really feel like it is possible. And so that's another thing I wanted to throw out there as a possible topic for us today. So, and also lastly, I'm just really appreciative of getting to see you all and people that I have so much respect for. Several of you have been pretty big parts of my life over the years. So anyway, it's great to see everybody.
Thanks, James. And I'll just wrap up our opening comments by saying this is kind of an odd meeting in that usually we're able to gather a great number of friends like are on this meeting when there's something exciting happening. We're rallying to defend a particular individual, as we had many times over the years, from Aaron Wattada nearly 15 years ago to Chelsea Manning a few years ago. But at this moment, we don't have a huge case. We obviously we have Daniel Hale that's in prison. Reality winner, just got out of prison. But it's just nice to be with you guys here to lay sort of the foundation to go forward. Because the world is a crazy place. It became a lot crazier in the last couple of weeks. So it's nice to be meeting here. So Courage Resist, as I mentioned, we've been around for a long time, and most of the people on this Zoom have direct experiences with us going back over a decade. And we've been dealing, as like the GI Rights Hotline and the Military Law Task Force, we've been dealing with I would say random individuals, but individuals with different cases. A lot of conscientious objectors on one hand to Captain Kennedy and the Army suing for his right to protest at Black Lives Matter. And then there's a spat of objectors who refused to deploy from the DC National Guard during Trump's squashing of protesters at that point. So there hasn't been a super common theme. So this meeting was an idea of how can we kickstart the GI Resistance Working Group of Veterans for Peace, and also continue doing the day in and day out work of Courage to Resist. And we're going to try to do this every month because Courage to Resist has met regularly anyways, but also to invite people to join the work, to bring new ideas, and to bring new energy. So that is why we're meeting. And I wanted to just basically say thanks for everybody joining, and open it up for any questions people have.
I wanted to real quick throw out one thing that's kind of important on the current dynamic, and that is that one of the biggest changes we're seeing is that the military right now is much less likely to prosecute than they had in the past, which is a fantastic situation for our clients. Negatively, though, has been more challenging aspect from a standpoint of movement building. Looking at 10 years ago, a lot of the movement building happened around these big cases where people stuck it to the man in a very public way. That dynamic really has not, people still could do that, but it would likely not play out so well for them personally. While the military is often presenting, allowing things to be on the table, that means a person gets thrown out of the military, but they're avoiding jail time, and often part of the deal is not being too vocal. And so I don't know how to work through that, because I think organizing wise, the needs are still there, but it is a change. The landscape has changed quite a bit over the last 10 years.
And I would underscore that, right? It's organizationally, movement-wise, historically, we've been so focused on, the heroic individual who steps up to face the consequences and face jail time. And, and then from that, we've gathered resources and political support. Far more challenging to deal with the more average individual who approaches us, say, we need help. We want, I don't want to do this bad thing, but I also don't want to go to jail because I have a wife and a kid that is, reliant upon me for existence. In that context, we are challenged to, provide ongoing support like that, and not be able to like, hey, everybody, raise a big orange flag and raise money and then pass that money on to that individual and their family. So that's challenging. And as I look around this meeting, particularly Maria from Center of Conscience of War, she knows that feeling very well. And not to put Maria on the spot, but I do want to have comments from you, because you can't show up here and not to add 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the legal resistance. I mean, I definitely want to say that, the legal pathways, through which people can resist, specifically as conscientious objectors, are well worn and continue to be well worn. I mean, we always have a surge of people reaching out to us whenever, the tragedy of war is brought to widespread public consciousness, and this time is no different. And we love it. Obviously, we welcome it, and we're here for folks who want to take that pathway. And I think I want people to know that when you're on the street and you're sort of stirring shit stirring, that's good, and you're driving traffic our way, and I think that's appropriate. If people want to take that legal pathway, we are here. Of course, we support people who choose to take extra legal pathways. People express their resistance in all kinds of extra legal ways, not just having a press conference and broadcasting their resistance in that way, but also going UA or AWOL. Many people take that route as an extra legal way to get themselves separated because of their opposition to what's going on. And then not just conscientious objection, but there are other legal pathways for people to resist. Oftentimes that could take the shape of a hardship, seeking a hardship separation, or seeking a separation for mental health reasons, for their own well-being. I've had to advise in the last few days 2 different people to go to the emergency room immediately because their commands are failing them with respect to providing for their mental health. So there's a lot of different forms, obviously, of resistance, and it's not always the movement building kind of resistance. Another thing I want to add to that real quick is that I find people sometimes are really just so, I mean, I think it was James just mentioned a few moments ago that after some healing, a cooling off, a healing period has gone by, people might want to get re-involved and become, re-energized to join the struggle. But while people are sort of traumatized, or still in that trauma, or still feeling that trauma, or once they're freed from that trauma, it's hard, I find, for a lot of people to stay engaged or to stay, in the struggle and want to, be a public voice. And I think a lot of that has to do with how they go in, what kind of support they have before they become, members of the armed forces, and what kind of support they have coming out, so how deeply their trauma stays with them and lingers, I think depends on those kinds of circumstances. I think people are sometimes surprised that we don't have like a cache of conscientious objectors waiting in line to go public, but many of them, and I would say the vast majority of them, just want to move on with their lives and just go into, sort of civil society. I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Maria. I resisted 31 years ago, and and within those 31 years, there have been years where I felt the same, where I disappeared and like, life is too freaking hard. I need to just survive. And the idea of being part of any kind of movement to accomplish anything was just like way too many bridges too far. So I actually, I'm grateful for the, for the privilege, right, to have this existence where I could, on the middle of a Wednesday, have this meeting and not have to, just be out there busting my butt to just barely get by. So anyways, thank you, Maria. You're awesome. Say hi to Bill. We have some hands up, Garrett, then Jules, and then Steve. Is that fair? Because that's what I saw. All right, Garrett.
Thanks for getting this together, Jeff. I appreciate everybody on the call. There's a wealth of experience here. Yeah, I mean, putting together kind of the draft of VFP's strategic plan, since that's the main hat that I wear as the executive director of Veterans for Peace. I really think that our objectives and our goals moving forward should be around denying the military resources, and I think that's falls within financial resources with, the Pentagon budget and, separations from the military industrial complex and getting money out of politics. And then the human resources, right? The personnel. And I see those as two things: truth and recruitment, making sure that we have a robust counter recruitment program to stop people going in, and a strong GI resistance program. And, I've witnessed a lot of friends and a lot of new friends kind of go through stages of resistance, GI resistance, and some find the support and the help that they need, and some don't. Some of that support and help is inadequate, even when it's there, and it really is heartbreaking, because I feel we have a general concept in Veterans for Peace that when service members put down their weapons, that war ends. And I want to continue that, but I don't think that we have the proper network and support structures to ask people to martyr themselves and take those sorts of risks. So I think this is absolutely critical to really the anti-war movement in the whole. And we are having a lot of conversations around places like Creech Air Force Base with shutdown Creech program with the drones, where we're looking at it more as a GI resistance opportunity than an anti-drone operation, because I think the most sustainable way that you could shut down drones is by you getting personnel to stop flying them, right? And then, you see more folks like Daniel Hale and people like that stepping forward in mass. If we can have a robust, protective GI resistance network that's really offering services, more people will be courageous to take those steps, right? Whether they're resources to get their story exposed, whether they want to do it quietly and just get the support they need to get the hell out. Either way, there's still organizing opportunities, whether they're celebrated heavily in the media or it's just individual members of our organizations talking to service members one-on-one, showing them real life examples of people who've done it, who've gone that pathway and have succeeded in, defeating the Department of Defense. Those are important stories, even if they're quiet stories. But it does require different levels of services that I don't think we've fully have incorporated. We have James, we have Maria, we have Military Law Task Force, we have GI Rights Hotline, we have, Courage to Resist. And it feels like, because of the current situation that James kind of brought up, all these organizations are kind of actually shrinking and restricting because the need is not so apparent, because the conflicts that we're in don't seem so severe to service members that they're trying to get out in mass. And it's not like people are getting drafted, or the heat of the Iraq war is on and people are worried about going and dying. Folks are joining the military, serving in the military without like this massive fear of the consequences to them, so they're just riding it out mostly, unless they're being put into awkward situations where we know the the military is a diverse place and there's a lot of bad missions out there still. But the military budget is increasing only. Our military industrial complex is still biting at the bit to get out there and drop bombs. We know that politicians are in it. We know that the culture in the United States, we have a military culture. So to assume that we're not going to see the situation where we're going to have this massive conflict where service members are going to be looking for a pathway to peace, I think we'd be naive to say that that's not going to happen again in our lifetimes. So what are we doing to prepare to make sure that occurs? I think we need those outreach mechanisms. We need a community of support rather than just individuals. We need to be welcoming GI resistors in with open arms, with a mass amount of people that are just holding them if they want to be in these spaces, and have communities of solidarity that are worshiping them, respecting them, and treating them like comrades. And I think that's the most successful pathway. So I want to see, I would like to see us kind of eventually, maybe not in this meeting, but break down all those areas, the organizations that we have that specialize in those certain areas. How do we support them and make sure that they have the capacity to operate at the level they need to do this? And where we don't have any sort of specialities that we need to really start building and putting energy in also. All right, I'm done. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Garrett. Right, Garrett mentioned like the GI Rights Hotline, and I know from conversations with them that they're staffed by older activists, and they're having a very hard time replacing those people with a younger crew that's going to be the future of that. Anyways, that's just underscore that challenge is very real. Garrett mentioned what we've done is not adequate, and I could say without a doubt that at our best we're barely adequate. But sometimes that's good enough, right, to get you through the day. And I always think to myself, well, what's the alternative? Nothing. So I guess that's why a lot of us are still doing the work, right? Because it's far better than the alternative. Obviously we could do better. Hey, Jules, thanks for waiting so long with your hand up.
It's all good. It's all good. I'm Jules. I'm also on staff over at Veterans for Peace. I guess I just kind of wanted to bring up, I was there at Creech with Garrett, and one of the things that Chris, who is another one of our comrades, has said before is, even if somebody were taking a 100% legal way out of the military, even if we had somebody who said, I want to leave today, we don't have resources to offer them for, like, once they get out, what the fuck do they do then? Because there are so many people who they can't leave a job because they have a child or a spouse who needs medical care or who has health problems. And so I think that's another thing for us to think about, things that will just keep people from being economically drafted into the military, things like universal health care and even universal income. Those things could help us be able to encourage more people to resist. I know that we're throwing like 1,000 things at y'all right now, but I feel like mutual aid could also be a big help with that, with supporting people who are getting out. But yeah, those are just things to consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Jules. Steve, I've known Steve for quite some time. He was at the Central Committee Conscientious Objection when I first met him. Today, he's helping lead up the climate working group of Veterans for Peace.
Climate Crisis and Militarism Project. Yeah,
exactly. That's what I meant.
Yeah. almost a couple of years, although I kind of stepped back because I had a condition called hairy cell leukemia, which the VA says Agent Orange is a presumptive cause of. So, yeah, I was with the GI rights hotline for about 2 decades, up to about 3 years ago. So, things that Maria said and things that James said, I have experience with too. Before that, though, I was a resistor in the Army during a time when the Army was in revolt. So I'm an alumnus of Vietnam and 2 stockades. And I guess what I want to say is, and back then, individuals were, I got a lot of support from people, civilians, and other resisting GIs. But there was this collective resistance, and well, it's close to my heart, it's close to my experience, and I kind of hope that this group will do something with that. Well, what can we do with it? Well, one thing I'm interested in is that the memory of that be known and publicized, because it's been important to the government and the military that that's not be known. So, so when I hear about Russian soldiers refusing and resisting and not doing what they want to do, I would like this group to, I don't know, I'm not sure what it is, to have some relationship to that. So anyway, I just want to say there has, I've supported all the work you all have done. It's great what Courage to Resist has done, but there was a time when there was collective resistance, and after the Vietnam War, it was much less for it's just how it was. But I think it's very important to people to understand that armies are limited by what people are willing to put up with, and the history of resistance is a rich one, and I don't know lots about it, but I keep wanting to know more and keep wanting to publicize that. And I'm really glad this group got reconstituted. I think it was like one to 2 years ago. I looked on the the GI resistance thing in Veterans for Peace, and it was referring to Bradley Manning, and I said, oh, this has not been updated for a while since Joseph Manning.
Yeah, a lot changed.
Yeah.
But thanks, Steve. Part of what Steve was saying is like the history of GI resistance. That's why Courage Resist helped launch do this Courage Resist podcast for the last 3 or so years. We've done about 100 episodes, including with Steve, including with Anne here, on GI and Edward, on GI resistance, and it's been a relatively easy, systematic thing we could do. Also, we're involved in promoting the Waging Peace in Vietnam exhibit that's traveling around the country. It's going to be here in San Francisco later this month, for example. So always looking to engage. Edward has had his hand up. His arm is probably pretty sore by now. It's been a while, but anyways, Edward, an amazing individual, went to federal prison, refusing to register for the draft. And I got to know Edward again in our collective efforts to try to get rid of selective service once and for all.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you, Jeff, for all that you've done over all these many years. And thanks to everybody on here. I'm here, not as a veteran, but as a supporter. And from my perspective as a draft resistor, I think there's a continuum. Everybody draws the line at a different point. For some people, they may not draw the line until they're actually, facing the prospect of combat, and they, put down their weapon and they walk away. Other people's may draw it at an earlier stage when they're asked to put on a uniform. Other people may draw it at a still earlier stage when they're asked to sign up to agree that they would be willing to be drafted. So I think it's all part of the same spectrum. And from that perspective, I was really interested in what James and Jeff said earlier about the problems caused by the fact that we don't have these sort of, poster child cause célèbre cases because the military is choosing to, relatively quietly discharge people rather than have show trials. And to me, that's very reminiscent of the difficulties we've had over the last 30 some years in getting people to pay attention to the draft since the government, after an ill-fated experiment with a bunch of loudmouths like me who made it very counterproductive for them to try to prosecute people, abandoned prosecuting selective service violators. So we've had this situation where there continues to be widespread non-compliance, but nobody will believe it without some poster children and without some prosecutions. And so this is not something new. I mean, I would take it as a victory, really, if the military feels that they've got to push these people out the back door rather than try to throw the book at them. That's a sign that we've had some success, that they fear more publicity, that they recognize that the public would not fully support, putting these people in cages forever. So it is progress. But then the question becomes, as you raised earlier, how do you deal with that? And I think it's actually quite characteristic of movements. James Scott, this is one of his books I just pulled off the shelf. He's a political scientist at Yale who's taken a really sort of anthropological bottom-up approach to political philosophy, starting with looking at peasant resistance to local authority. And he's got a really good analysis of the relationship between broad-based, subaltern, often closeted resistance by people who feel like they want to, and he talks partly about military resistance, but also a wider spectrum of life, but people who want to resist, but who feel like from their subaltern position, they can't afford to stick their nose out too publicly. So it's more like, quiet malingering and sabotage and these sorts of things. And, desertion rather than overt mutiny is one of the examples he uses. But that's often twinned with a much smaller group of overt resistors who, either for motivation or because they have a platform of privilege where they figure they can get away with it, where there's this smaller group of overt resistors. And so it's, the question is, how do you work those together? And again, that's very much something we've had with the draft resistance movement, where the small number of people who spoke out and resisted publicly is in no wise representative of the demographics and beliefs of the larger number of people who've quietly not complied. And so how do we respect that and educate people about that? One thing, without belaboring this too far, I think one of the things that's important out of that is to recognize when we're counseling people or when people are coming to us seeking advice, that the decision of whether to opt out of the military and the decision of whether to do so publicly and in a confrontational way are independent decisions, both of which need to be thought about. And it's important to help people realize that those are independent choices, that on the one hand, opting out doesn't have to mean overt confrontation. And on the other hand, if you're going to opt out, there are choices, and there are choices that may have grave personal consequences, but may have great public benefits. And the final thing I'll say is the people who've helped me have the most insight into that have been my queer comrades in resistance, who liken this to the difference between becoming conscious of one's own gay identity and choosing to come out to others about it. And how do you talk to people about the importance of coming out as, for example, a military resistor or a draft resistor? How do you talk to people about the importance of coming out and the value of it without feeling to pressure them into it so that they can make their own choice, but also so that they realize it is an option and that other people have made that choice and it's had benefits? And maybe there needs to be some more explicit addressing of that in what we put out. So anyway, lots of ideas, no solutions. I'll shut up and hope you all carry on with this wonderful work and I can find ways to help with it.
Thanks, Edward. Edward, I thought that was an amazing analogy. Thank you. I have never thought about that that way. But like I do remember my own decision to come out against the war, and it was definitely the hardest hours of my life, and I remember like every moment very vividly. So, because everything changes after that, you're one person, you become another person. And it was, I was very, very aware of that even in those moments at 20, 21 years old.
Oh, I was going to say the decision to be public or not public and how one resists. Yeah. And that the risk to the individual soldier when they're making these decisions is huge, and the disparity, I mean, it's so incredibly uneven. I think about Yolanda Hewitt Vaughn, who was a doctor, a physician, and had 2 kids, and she went to Fort Leavenworth, and I went to Fort Knox for 2.5 weeks in personnel confinement facility, and then was just like, get the hell out of here, you're too big of a pain in our ass. But for her, it was much more significant. And my feeling about that is like, we ask a lot of people. I don't know if that's correct what I'm trying to say, but it's like, what carried me along was blissful ignorance. Can I just say that? It's like, I had no idea how, I didn't know what it would mean to be put on television, and I didn't have the answers for resistance. And it's a really big deal. I don't, when we support resistors, it's more than just, can you help me get out of the military? It's what happens to them afterwards, like the aftercare, I think is important. I went home, I couldn't get a job. I had people that wanted to punch me in the face. It was just, I was not ready for everything that it meant. Even after being out of the military, it's like, okay, now how do I resume my life? And I think that's a fair discussion.
Colonel Wright, thank you for waiting your turn.
Please, just Anne.
Okay, Anne.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to be too over familiar.
Oh, geez. Well, thank you for getting all this together. It's really great to see everyone. And, when I resigned, I didn't get out of the military. I stayed in the whole time, but then I resigned out of the State Department 19 years ago over the Iraq War. So it's on March 19th, that'll be 19 years that I've been out of the government. And I totally echo what you all are saying about, boy, man, does that change your life? And just, you can remember moment by moment in those decision points of, oh God, here we go. Okay, I'll do it. Well, I found that, I was older. I've had savings and stuff like that. So I wasn't immediate, and I didn't have a family. So I wasn't immediately destitute or anything like that. I did find a year later this group called Veterans for Peace, just remarkably at the convention in Boston in 2004. And I found that, the camaraderie of VFP, the camaraderie of Courage to Resist, the GI Rights Hotline, the Center for Conscientious Objection, all of you all are just, you're such important people for those who, particularly the younger ones that are coming out of the military and are really just getting hammered. I would say on what Steve was talking about, right now we are involved in a war. It's not, thank God, it's not our own military that's out killing people again, but we're certainly seeing that there are two militaries that are killing each other. And I think a call from U.S. Veterans for Peace, an anti-war call, and I know we've got a statement that's up on VFP, a very good statement, you know, stop this war shit. But I wonder if there's any way we can go that one step further of the actual support for resistors. Although, you know, how can we support them when they're in Russia and the Ukraine? But maybe just the moral support of knowing that there are going, or the acknowledgement that there are going to be people in both of those militaries that are going to say, I do not want to do what I'm being asked to do, and to let them know on an international level that there are others that understand what they're having to go through, and to the extent that we can offer solace and, you know, whatever, we stand there to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. You know, interesting enough, you know, in addition to the statement you're talking about, Ann, Steve and the Climate Emergency Group had another statement that went out in yesterday's national newsletter. I thought that you know, that talked a little bit about military resistance. I wrote an op-ed of sorts for Courage to Resist on, you know, basically the key thing was, you know, Russian invading troops should refuse to fight this unjust war.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. And I mean, I hope you guys have seen that War Resisters International is, you know, putting out the call to support Russian refusers, and Just Security just had a nice piece about accepting Russian resistors as refugees, giving them protection globally and things like that. So that's great. Things are happening in that respect. I wanted to take a little bit of a left turn with this, or a right turn, based on how you perceive what I'm going to say. But looking at the composition of today's military and what the resistance within happens to be right now is a little bit bizarre. So because we are, you know, known, you know, not just through the GI Rights Hotline, of course, but the Center on Conscience and War as well, to work on like freedom of religion and belief issues, we have received in recent months many calls from people who claim to have a strenuous religious objection to the COVID vaccine. And digging into a lot of the you know, substance of their claims, they definitely don't hold water, and they do not pass, you know, legal muster with respect to, you know, the standards for religious accommodation or religious objection. But it's so, you know, and then we've gotten some calls over the last several years about people who don't want to serve with queer people. You know, does that make them a religious objector? You know, they think that the military is, I mean, this was just in a hearing last year. Edward, you were in the hearing, I think, in the House Armed Services Committee, where, you know, I think Matt Gaetz was talking about the military being woke, and that this is a problem, that the military is teaching critical race theory. So we have people, you know, objecting to those types of things. So there's a weird trend happening in the military, and I'm not offering any answers about, you know, I don't certainly don't claim to know kind of what, you know, we can contribute to this conversation at the moment, but I just kind of want to put that out there, that it's like, of course, there's this leftist resistance to, you know, militarism and violence and imperialism and, you know, all of those other things. That's alive and well, but there's also like this right-wing resistance to the military, you know, even super young people like 18 years old joining and saying, whoa, I didn't know that this was the military I was going to be joining. You know, I didn't know I was going to have to be indoctrinated into, you know, critical race theory and, you know, things like that. So it's, I don't know what the future of the military composition is going to look like. So just kind of want to put that out there.
we are going to do this meeting every month. That's the plan. And I think the format is we'll invite a guest presenter to talk for like 15 minutes. For example, maybe we'll have Edward talk about, his issue, or Maria or somebody, and then have a discussion, and then we'll do the Courage Resist business meeting. So we'll have a presentation. We have a discussion of any current events, any objectives, any specific work we're trying to accomplish, and then our Courage Resist business meeting. So that's the general plan, and hopefully it'll get better